Today we're going to talk about slitting methods. On typical slitters, there's really three types of slitting that you hear about: score slitting, shear slitting, and razor slitting. I have this photograph up because it has all three in this particular machine. I can give you a quick view of each one of them, talk about the products that are typically used with each one of them, and talk about the varieties, because for each one of them, there's many different styles. So for example, in razor slitting, there's individual holders, there's block and blade, there's razor combs. That holds true with the shear and the score as well. So you're looking at score slitting here, shear slitting here, and razor there. So why don't we start by just looking at razor slitting. Razor slitting is most commonly done with an individual holder. That holder is holding simply a razor blade positioned and slitting through materials. So you may ask, what kind of materials are you going to be slitting? Most common, it's film. It's not paper because the blades don't last that long. Could be, but you're not going to get much of a life out of it. That would be for a very unique application. It's mostly film, and film's up to a certain thickness, because after it gets too thick, the blades dull quickly and you get a raised edge. So the range is typically from about 0.5 mil to somewhere around 5 to 7 mils, depending on the type of film rod. So these are all razor knives lined up here. They have depth adjustments and you can move them by hand, but this is just one style. Bring up a picture here of another style. This is block and blade. So you're having a razor knife with a precision block, in this case, a spacer. They're all packed together and they're designed to quickly set up razor blades with a lot of precision. One thing nice about it is there's a lot of precision and there's a lot of exposed blade with the block and blade setups. You can get a lot of new cutting positions. So you start in one spot and dial it into a few new edge positions. If you're cutting through some thick products, this one's pretty desirable because you got a lot of exposure there. And if you want to make quick, accurate setups, nothing beats it. You do need tooling though. You need blocks for all your sizes. So this is just another style. Block and blade is also very desirable when you're trying to do narrow cuts. When I say narrow cuts, I mean 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, so on and so forth, because you can get these spaced very closely together, unlike the holders, which have a certain inherent width, and it's hard to get them to any other point. Now, this block and blade is set up in such a way that you can remove the whole rig, build it up on the bench if you choose to. It also has a cover, so when you're threading the machine or handling it, it's completely covered and out of harm's way. There's a photograph of block and blade right here in a slitter. You can see these blades penetrating down and then the cover that goes on it. So there's a handle that allows you to rotate the blades into the material, and you can choose your depth that way. And like I said, this is a whole removable rig. And on some of our machines, we design it so that you can have different styles all within the same mounting. If you want to do block and blade in the morning, that's great. If you want to use a razor comb later, that's fine. If you want to use individual holders, that's fine. Individual holders are typically used on wider cuts where you want quick and easy adjustment of razor blades, and there's a limited number, somewhere between edge trim, 2 knives, and say 10 to 15 knives. It's kind of the practical limit. Although you can keep going, as I showed in a previous photograph, that's where you see most of those applications. And most of the applications are for film. This one happens to be for foam tape. It does work in some applications for other things like foam tapes, but you'll see most of the time it's used for film. Now, razor blades could be set up a couple of ways. One way is between 2 either rolls, and that's what's here. So you can position these blades anywhere you want. The web is held tight between 2 either rolls, and you can go between metric sizes and English sizes without any problem. Other ways we do it is we slit into a brush roll, so the web has a little bit more support. You wrap the material, the blades penetrate into the brush, and it gives you some advantages. A lot of people like that, particularly when they're taking narrow trim. That edge is really supported nicely, and if you're trying to hold, say, 1/4 inch of trim all day, that does a great job. Another way that we do it, in a grooved roll, similar to the brush, but the blades fall into the groove, the material's wrapped around it, and that really gives you good web support. You have to be careful though with that. You have to choose increment, whether it be metric or English, and the spacing that's good for the cut ranges that you need to resolve. One last one that I didn't really talk too much about is a razor comb. And razor combs are designed so you could drop the blades into the comb, and the comb is usually set with set patterns. So this is a single-sided razor blade in one of our precision EDM style combs. Looks like on 1/8 increments. And that allows operators to really quickly just drop blades in, put the cover on, and get going. So it's great. If you're living within that range, it's not uncommon for our customers to kind of have an English spacing and a metric spacing to cover all different groups and slit widths that they may have, but that's that. And this particular comb is extremely nice because there's a lot of blade exposure. So it allows you to get into lots of different material thicknesses and things of that nature. So by using that hand wheel on a depth stop that we have, you can set where you're hitting on the blade. You can slightly vary the angle. We predetermine it as best possible in the geometry of the machine build, but you can vary that slightly, and then you could get new cutting positions. So if you're cutting here and you notice the blades are starting to wear, you can move it down and move it down and move it down and get a few new cutting positions with the exposure. And that holds true with all the different styles that I've shown so far. And occasionally you'll see some other setups, like this is a fully automatic razor positioner. So you'll go to a screen, you'll set your cut width, it'll automatically move the blades and allow you to set the system up automatically. So you see this occasionally. Most of them fall within the range of individual manual holders, block and blade, or the razor comb. But this is starting to become more popular. You actually can resolve a lot of this with shear slitting, which I'll talk about shortly. So sometimes you don't need to do this with razor because shear can get you through a bigger range of products. So the other thing about razor is it has a speed limitation. Depends on the material. Certain films slit very, very easily. Other materials may have additives, like in the case of white film, you might have titanium dioxide. That tends to dull the blades pretty quickly. And so there's not one set answer for speed, but generally speaking, when you go into products or into different groups of materials that you run, you generally know what the speeds are. For example, if you're doing a flexible packaging like a water bottle label or something like that, and you're running the machine somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 feet a minute is sort of the practical speed with good blades. And I didn't mention it before, but I'll mention it now. Blades come in a variety of different styles, high-speed steel, carbide, etc. So you may have to experiment with blade styles that'll give you the best life benefit to speed that you're trying to accomplish. You know, in the example that I was mentioning, like in a water bottle label, you probably will get somewhere around 300,000 linear feet, which is okay. But in today's high-speed machines, you could be running faster using shear, and you wouldn't have to worry about replacing blades, let's say every 3 or 4 hours. You might go every 6 or 8 weeks, which is a huge difference. But there's practical reasons why people use razors as well. Sometimes we're taking bleed cuts, meaning slitting narrow lanes out and vacuuming them out. Also, they're very quick, easy, low cost, simple to use. So people just prefer them, especially when they're doing short jobs and they're changing the blades anyway. Razor blades are popular for that space. So you'll see quite a range of speeds, but depends on the product, really what's going to work in your world.